Welcome to Ancient Awakening with Castalia. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Castalia and I work on the Realm of Inspiration and ElfianRealm.com to help inspire the collective on their ascension journey. I work to help heal and guide through my channeled readings and coaching sessions. I am a certified card reader, channeler, crystal Reiki master, and certified in Greek mythology and ancient Greek gods and goddesses, among other things. What better way to combine both of my passions than to uncover the spiritual metaphors hidden in mythology? The teachings and guidelines are already there before us. They are hidden beneath the surface of stories full of tragedy, heartbreak, war, death, love, and more. So, the time for metaphors is done. Let's find clarity together through a transformative journey that is Ancient Awakening. Now, before we dive into today's video, let's quickly revisit the prompts from last week's episode. Last week, we talked about the flight of Icarus and the spiritual implications of that myth. And the first journal prompt, based on the spiritual implications found in that myth, was, where in my life have I flown too close to the sun, and what did I learn from the fall? As always, I'll give a little short summary of my answer to this prompt. There was a time where I would say I flew too close to the sun. I was overworking myself for one path that I wanted to do when I was in the second half of my sophomore year of high school. I wanted to pursue theater arts, and I was calling colleges and volunteering with things to do with the performing arts and student directing and costuming and teaching theater, like teacher assistant and dual credit classes and doing a bunch of stuff. I flew too close to the sun. There was a time, and this is like my example of this, where I had to get from point A to point B in like 10 minutes. I had to get to my high school from the village library of the town that my high school is in. I had to get from point A to point B in like 10 minutes. It's normally like a 15-minute drive, maybe more. And it had snowed a few days prior. I had to go, I think on the country roads, because this was in the Midwestern United States at the time, I was going roughly 100 miles per hour. I am lucky that I made it without a ticket and alive, and with ample time. I think I made it there in 6 minutes. Yeah. This experience, when I got there, my whole body was shaking. I was shaking. My head was reeling. And I'm like, everything has to go right. I have gone out of my way to make sure that everything is going in accordance to plan. The next day, there was a snowstorm and ice. And I was like, nope, we're gonna make everything work. Couldn't. Everything got canceled. I was freaking out. I had to drive in the ice and snow, and I was frantic. A month and a half later, the pandemic happens. And everything that I was like, I was working like, chicken with my head off to the edge, going on. And this is very like theater arts, because this kind of works with today's episode actually. I was trying to achieve what I wanted. Was with the volunteering that I was doing, I was trying to get recognition. With the teaching assisting, I was trying to get college credit. For the student directing, I was trying to get recognition, because the year prior, I was also performing and student directing in something the year prior, because I was doing something called Performance in the Round, and I was the lead character. My costume was so big that it kind of went over the line, and there's like a disqualification. You have to be in the round, and I kind of felt responsible. Not entirely my fault. Other people stepped out of the circle as well. But I felt this responsibility, so I'm like, I need to get this. I need to get this to win. I need to do the perfect costuming. I was also, at the same time, also performing in something else that I had to, everything that I was doing, I was seeking recognition. And the universe was slapping me in the face and saying, you need to rest. Because in one day, I was doing teaching assistant, volunteering for performing arts, everything that I was doing. I had rehearsal for performance in the round. I had rehearsal for another. I had everything in one day. I was flying too close to the sun. I was seeking too much success. And then eventually I ended up learning after the fall of like, oh no, this is taken away from me. And this is taken away from me. And this is taken away from me. And we didn't win state. And we didn't get to perform this other competitive play because of the pandemic. And I didn't get like the college credit that I wanted, or the like number, there was some weird complication there. And I lost all of the opportunities with the volunteering because of this. Everything that I was striving for, I was flying to the sun for, I lost. And then I ended up realizing I was fighting so hard to make something work and overextending myself. That's not really what I want with my life. It took the fall of like everything falling apart, everything I was working for, to realize all the success that I was striving towards, that's not what I want. That's not what I want to do. I actually prefer writing. I actually prefer this. Like, I started to figure out what I liked. I was over extending myself trying to follow success because I felt like I was supposed to. And when I fell, I realized that what I was flying towards is not what I wanted in the first place. Or not what I needed, rather. It was really a fall for me. It was a very humbling experience because I thought that I can control the world. I was like, yeah, I can go 100 miles per hour and not get a ticket and not die and get to point A to point B. I can do whatever I want. I can control the situation. I can control the world. I can control the weather. I thought I could control anything, and everything was happening to show me you cannot. You're not in control of these situations. The world's gonna work how it's gonna work. Weather is gonna weather, and pandemics, they don't always happen, but it just so happens that they happen. So it was a very humbling experience. And I think when you fly too close to the sun, I mean, you're just following success, and I was like on that grind, and I was losing myself. Everything was crashing. It's never worth it. I learned from the fall that what I thought that I was supposed to want wasn't what worked with me anymore. Next was, what does the sun symbolize for me, and how do I relate to it? The sun symbolizes a lot of different things, but we kind of talked about that, and that was like the divine masculine creation energy. In the myth of Icarus, it can be success. So in that story of my life that I shared, it was seeking success. In general, it's the divine masculine creation and logical. It's the mental body. And I relate to it because I actually have just like a really strong affinity for the sun. So that's how I personally relate to it. Yeah, and basically my response to this was just explaining what we talked about in, I forgot the episode number, but when we talked about Ilios and Selene. So check out that one, that myth, uncovering, because there's a lot of spiritual implications there. Number 3, who is my daedalus, the guide I've ignored or forgotten? I personally, well, currently, I'm connecting with my spirit team, I'm connecting with my guardian angels, you know, following spiritual mentors. I feel like right now, there isn't one, but a lot of times, my daedalus is my highest self. Sometimes I ignore my highest self, like my intuition is telling me, don't do this thing, and I do it anyway. That's, again, Icarus. Icarus ignoring, it's quite literally that. I think that when I do a meditation, when I'm in a Reiki healing state and I am faced with my guardian angels and my spirit team, I listen. But like in my day-to-day life, when my intuition comes or my highest self guiding me, sometimes I ignore it. And that's not always very good. And I'm still learning that. Number 4 was, what wings have I built, and are they made of wisdom or wax? When I was 16, they were made of wax. And they melted. They melted, I mean, when I think about the time of my life, it was like slowly everything fell apart. Like, not just that, like multiple things. Up until the summer solstice, everything fell apart. And that's when I was like at my breaking point of like, I have nothing left to lose. I'm going to seek healing. And 5 years later, 6 years later, here I am. So ended up being for the best. Now, they are wisdom-y wax. I think that there are still elements of my wings that are waxy, that I can still strengthen and turn into wisdom. But I would say more so wisdom, and it is based on this spiritual healing journey, healing trauma, healing the inner child, healing from narcissistic abuse, healing from phobia, uncovering psychic abilities, tuning into clairaudiency, Reiki healing, and also an affinity for history and understanding ancestry, so Greek mythology, Greek history. Eventually, I hope that my wings fully turn into wisdom and I can fly them over to near Icaria and go to that region of islands where my ancestors are from. So one day maybe I'll be sitting and recording one of these episodes from a mountain in Carpathos. Who knows? We're gonna get there one day. That's my goal. One day. Attica, it's close enough. I would say it has turned into wisdom, like when I did even what I learned in business management and retail and now volunteering and environmental conservation. Everything that I do now, I try to learn. I've mentioned this before, I try to learn a lot about it. And I think when it comes to mythology, a lot of the times when mistakes are made and we have these cautionary tales, it's because the archetypes aren't learning things. But when we see growth, it's when it's learning from mistakes. I feel like that's where that is. Like Daedalus, he learned from his mistakes in the myth, which we'll dive into more, like the whole like myth with Daedalus. Like he learned from his mistakes. He set himself free. He was with wings of wisdom, but Icarus was not. And when you go through things where you are not trying to, like, Daedalus understood everything of the mechanism that he built. So he was following the wisdom and what he understood. Icarus wanted to be ignorant for the sake of being ignorant, which is a vice that is worth overcoming, for sure. That is something that I will try and find more myths that show that, and hopefully maybe show like how can we overcome that. It's obviously, it's like being humble. I think being humble enough to like admit fault, admit wrong. Humility is key. I do feel like that would be the answer to a question I proposed to myself, and I just answer that. Yeah. I guess self-answering questions for me. Number 5. If I could speak to Icarus mid-flight, what would I say and what would he say back? I would honestly ask him, why are you ignoring your father's guidance? I think that he would say that he felt probably trapped in Crete, that he felt shame for the mistakes of his father, and he wanted to be free from being tied to his father's story and make his own name. Like, what if, he would say, what if I am the first to touch the sun and come back and survive? Then he can change the legacy and reputation of his family from what it was at the time in the mythos, which was, Daedalus being partially at fault for the Minotaur, but also then creating the kind of helping with the labyrinth with the Minotaur, and kind of just being really heavy in the story of the Minotaur, and the Minotaur killed loads of people, and just there is kind of some negativity with that legacy, even though Daedalus was a great inventor. I would think that what Icarus was looking for, and what I feel from like reading other myths and really diving into his story, I feel like I understand, like, since, I have been hearing these stories since I was, a child. I was like 2 years old, and mommy, tell me the next myth. Like, I want to know these stories, and understand them, and I feel like I understand that he was probably seeking his own identity, and the sun can sometimes be represented as the ego. Like in astrology, your sun sign is like I'm a Scorpio, sun sign, that is your ego, right? So there is that, and he was following the ego, and Daedalus was staying in that in-between of the balance of the mind, the heart, the soul. That's what I feel like he would say from just a certified Greek mythology perspective, and also from just seeing this kind of personality with clients when I work with spiritual coaching. That's what I would feel. Also for being there, like I've been there where, my estranged father, lots of things not great there, and I wanted to, especially when I was following like the theater arts, it's like I want to make a name for myself that it's like it couldn't be possible that I was that man's child. And now I did that in a different way. I still did that, but then I was seeking it to prove a point and to kind of like stick it in your face situation. Now I did it for myself, and I don't care. Like, He can know, he cannot know, I don't care, I'm on my own. But Icarus was definitely seeking also maybe his father would be proud of him if he was able to accomplish such a feat. There is that as well. So that being said, there's a lot of commentary. And, you know, Daedalus just wanted to achieve peace. Now, Aristophanes wrote a lot of plays. That was a really poor segue. But he wrote a lot of plays. This is just one of my 3 hardcover booklets that have 3 plays in them. So I have 9 of his plays. So Aristophanes wrote a play called The Peace in the shadow of the Peloponnesian War. On the surface, it is a comedy, a farmer flying to Olympus on a dung beetle to plead for peace. But beneath the laughter lies a spiritual allegory. This play is not only about politics, it's about ego, divine order, and the cosmic restoration of harmony. In this episode, we will journey through parody, myth, and ritual to uncover the spiritual implications of this Aristophanes comedy. Now, this Aristophanes comedy, I have marked here. So this is a 1,357 stanza play. Here I have this little like fun bookmark of Aristophanes. I have them of all the playwrights and like philosophers and poets. It's really fun, but I only have hard copies. I used to have hard copies of the other plays like Sophocles and all of them. These ones were like easier to transport over the Atlantic Ocean than my other ones. So I donated to the theater arts, so you know, paid it back. I might have to re-find those because those were very fun. So one of like Aristophanes, I'm gonna read it from the back of this. Even though I have this notebook here of my uncovering the spiritual implications of his plays, because I always felt like there has to be more. Like there was more, and also with reading the play, I realized like he's a very smart playwright. So I started with The Peace, and we're only going to talk about The Peace. As you can tell from the title of this video, we're only talking about The Peace. Eventually, I'll hit all of them. But I found a lot in this play, and I felt like instead of like jumbling a bunch of different plays together and it kind of feeling like disjointed, this feels like a good starting point. So see, I have a lot of notes. I have a lot of pages of notes, and they're like color coded as well. So I have this. I put it down in a digital format that would be easier to read. This play I've actually kind of been. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I picked this one because I already started dissecting this play like a year ago. So I didn't have to do as much work. I did have to reread what I wrote a year ago and kind of challenge my own thoughts, because a year ago I was still working through a lot of different certifications, and since finishing like a philosophy certification and a democracy certification, and this is really a play, and Aristophanes in general, I'm gonna read about him from his little bookmark, but in general his plays were commentaries on a lot of the political climate of the time. So let me read this. Aristophanes is known as the great comedic poet of ancient Greek theater. He had written about 40 comedies. I do not have all of them. I think I have like the ones that like were the most intact that survived. And he followed with great interest the political activities in Athens from the island of Aena, where he lived. He tried to secure his quality life, and many times he presented his writings with the names of other poets. Some of his greatest works are The Wasps. I have also read The Wasps. But The Wasps, I read it, and I did not dissect it at all. So that one, I'm like, maybe that'll be next. And The Frogs, etc., and his name is linked to ancient Greek comedy. He's also sometimes known as the father of old comedy. Old comedy, it's like sarcastic comedy. I was reading this play and I was like, this is like So I think we still have this comedy in Greece. I'm going to be honest. I don't think that's old comedy, but it's like political satire. There's a lot of satire to it, and in the satire, I found a lot of interesting metaphors. See, my notebook, just for the piece alone, I have like 15 pages, because it's front and back. Not pages. I have a lot that I was able to uncover. The piece, I was in Delphi when I started that journey, because of the fact that a lot of playwrights used to go to Delphi to drink from the spring of inspiration, which I am named after, so Castellet Springs. So that's kind of why I did that there. Anyway, to the play itself. This play, when I read myths, and when I specifically read like plays, and especially with Sophocles, I read it and I'm like, I can't look at this and find implications. Actually, the piece, right away, I found implications, but a lot of times when I read plays, especially with Aristophanes, he loves the choir. The choir is very much involved. There's a lot of like, a lot of things that it kind of seems nonsensical to the modern day, but you have to put yourself in the mindset. And as I'm like finishing my ancient Greek certification, like ancient Greek history certification, and in general Greek history certification, I'm understanding it more, that you have to put yourself in the mindset of the times, and then reading it from this outside perspective of what we know from history. That's how you can uncover the implications. So one thing I want to touch on is like divine hierarchies and archetypes. So one of the first things I did with my read through is I'm trying to find when by name they say a deity. So Zeus, Apollo, Dionysius, Aphrodite, Poseidon is also mentioned, the Graces, the Muses, I believe those are all the ones. And Hermes. Hermes is like a pivotal character in the play. Can't forget him. So I was trying to note and notice those things. One note is also another reason why I dissected this in Delphi is because even though Anna by boat might be a little bit closer to me, Delphi is on land, and Anna and Delphi have something very pivotal in common. And Aristophanes in his plays loves to mention Delphi, the Oracle of Delphi, and Apollo. So the patron god of ancient Greek times of Aena and of Delphi is Apollo. So Apollo, we have discussed in the Delphic Maximus and the Art of Channeling. Apollo, god of prophecy, poetry, creativity, obviously. It also kind of makes sense. Hermes very much gives comedy vibes, so him being a, very pivotal character in this play also makes sense. So I was trying to figure out what deity archetypes are mentioned, does he mention? And, this is not, in a sense, it has mythical elements. His plays are commentary, because he breaks the fourth wall in the plays. There's one specific moment, I don't think that I actually typed this in my notes, but one specific, in my digital notes, one specific comment he makes, I want to quote it, but it's along the lines of, sulfur boasting. A little side tangent. Sulfur boasting, bolting materials used in environments containing hydrogen sulfate, often called sour service. In the play, a character says, sulfur bolting Zeus. They don't speak with Zeus of reverence. There's a lot of insulting of Zeus. So I'm trying to also figure out times. This was Aristophanes was 400 to 300 BC, end of the 400s, early 300s BC. They were still monotheistic at the time. I believe so. I mean, this was before, right? So a lot of insulting Zeus. I get it that Apollo was his patron, but yeah, it was also, that was just I know that because that was a very intellectual, he had a servant saying it in the play. So that also to me, I was I'm starting to understand the times as well, and for a servant to call someone to state to Zeus, I guess, you know what, it could make sense in the times because there are a lot of people who do negatively talk about higher powers because they're upset. But that was interesting. Where's the direct thing? Ah, here. I suspect, okay, this is a direct quote from the play. I suspect some pert young whittling there is asking, well, but what is this all about? What can the beetle mean? And I think that some Iowanan sitting by will answer, now I've nae doubt, but this is aimed at Cleon. It eats the muck, say, it eats the muck sown shamelessly. So this, okay, towards the end of it, it does make sense. It's like a translation of ancient Greek. Basically, a little bit of a lack of respect for Cleon. I do have Cleon. Cleon was one of the main people who wanted to prevent peace. He was known for his malpractice. He was an Athenian, and in times of peace, his clumsy persona would be less believable. It's kind of a little backstory there. Aristophanes has a character say, I suspect someone is going to be trying to uncover what this all means. Yes, and that someone is me. And I didn't have an Iowanan telling me what it means. I just continued reading. And I'm nowhere near the Iowanan Sea. I'm actually near the Aegean, so... I think he was pointing at the Athenians. Also, there was, like, in Sparta, that the war was more, there was more success, more ego there. There was a lot of ego blocking things, which I'll talk about more. I just wanted to reference that point before I read even the first part 1. I've gone off on too many tangents to even get to the point of this episode. So, from the very beginning, Zeus is mocked. He is feared but never respected. One of the few times he's actually mentioned with reverence is when they mention his daughters, the Muses. I just find this very interesting. Blatant disrespect of Zeus. Zeus, as an archetype, would represent, I mean, he was the king of the gods, right? It's just a very interesting thing. I mean, spiritually, is that, like, just disrespect over authority? That's not spiritually, that's just in general, the implications, disrespect over authority. But, like, is it disregarding him as, like, a leader figure, someone to follow? At the time, they were all following kind of whatever from the pantheon. There wasn't one main one. That is blatantly stated. This is important context because... Do I just want to skip to this now? I might just skip to this now. Because in the play, and also we uncover this with the Maximus, they mention gods and God, like a singular God. And it's in different contexts. And it is a different word, like it translates differently as well. So it's not like something getting lost in translation. In the play, they mention the gods so much. And then towards the end, there's a mention of just a singular god. Is it Zeus? Is it Apollo? Who is this singular god? Because in reference to any of the deities, it's the gods. But then, and talking about God or higher father, I think that's one of the first things I noticed in the play. Is that there's also a mention of, like, is it a higher source? Like, what is it? Because that also makes you wonder at the time, you know, 300s BC, were they on their own switching to monotheism? Because it's also like, it's only mentioned a few times, just the word God, not the gods. Am I thinking, is it Chaos, who was like the start of all in the mythology? Was it like the creator? Did they believe in one source that was bigger than all the deities? It kind of seems that way. So, furthermore on that, Apollo, Dionysius, and Aphrodite are invoked with reverence, clarity, transformation, and beauty. This hierarchy reveals something profound. True divinity lies not in thunderous authority, but in inner truth. Even servants and Hermes, the messenger, carry wisdom. Aristophanes democratizes the sacred, showing that insight can come from unexpected voices. The hero So there is mythical parody. And the hero, Belanthrope, once flew to Olympus on a Pegasus. Aristophanes twists this myth to that there's a folklore parody of it, which is, and the whole play is a parody, where his farmer ascends on a dung beetle. I mean, there's a folklore of the dung beetle, and the parody is grotesque but deeply symbolic. It tells us that humility, not grandeur, is the path to transformation. The main character is trying to bring peace. He ascends to the gods, to kind of, with Hermes. What he's trying to do is get Hermes on his side, because Zeus would give up on Greece and to bring forth the peace, right? Trying to get Hermes on his side. Hermes in this play, very interesting archetype, because messenger of the gods, mischief, and he so easily folds to libations being poured for him, like saying, we will celebrate you. There is this kind of sense of an implication there where, like, the messenger of the gods is going to do what this human wants and disobey Zeus to have people celebrate him. This kind of brings, like, from a mythical perspective, is like, is the way that they are living because of the libations being poured for them. Like, are they immortal because people believe in them? So then if people don't believe in them, then they aren't able to be immortal anymore. And then is that kind of reference to our spirit team, where if we don't pay attention to them, they're not able to help us, but the more that we connect to them, the more that they're able to help us. Interesting. So back to that. The fable of the beetle. So there is a fable mentioned. The fable of the beetle defeating the eagle reinforces this lesson. So there is the fable that is mentioned in this play, of a eagle laying his eggs in Zeus's bosom. Basically, I'm shortly summarizing this. And then a beetle flies past, and the eagle and the beetle were at war. And the beetle swoops around Zeus's head and causes Zeus to kind of move all around, trying to swat him, and then dropping the eggs, and then the eagle loses. Very interesting, because Zeus definitely connected to the mental body, right? His, like, ears being clogged by the noise of the beetle, of maybe transformation, change, or the dirty work, the shadow work, maybe. And he's trying to hold on to the eagle connected to, obviously, the mental body, clarity, and a higher perspective. Kind of maybe loses that perspective by getting distracted by something else. Something else could be, sometimes you have to change your perspective or lose the perspective that you had before, the perspective of the ego, to be able to see things from the perspective of the soul. And I definitely saw this implication when reading that. It is cutting and persistent and disrupts egoic dominance. Comedy inverts tragedy, showing that peace arises not from heroic violence, but from sober humility. The two main obstacles of peace, these two men of the time, the one in Sparta and the one in Athens, who they didn't want the war to end. They didn't want the time of peace because, oh, I'm going to lose my glory. Oh, people are going to notice my malpractice. It's the ego. But to have humility and be like, you know what? My own self-interest isn't worth the rest of the people suffering. That brings about peace. That brings about inner peace, and also peace for all. So servants and messengers as philosophers. So I really loved the way that the servants, like, there was a lot of intellect in the way that they spoke. And it sounded silly and goofy, but when, again, like that sulfur bolting thing, when you read it, like, there is some, like, quick wit. A lot of quick wit, and quick wit is intelligence. Quick wit is a sign of intelligence. I wish I had quick wit. Sometimes I do, I will say, sometimes I do. But it is a sign of, like, intelligence. So there isn't this, I feel like sometimes when you look at, like, plays or stories from the past, those of a lower class aren't really given a quick wit, or kind of seem like dim-witted. But I felt like there was more quick wit with these characters, which does say a lot about, obviously, Aristophanes writing comedy. He was obviously probably a very quick-witted person. but also gives this like feeling that those who were of a lower class had some higher intelligence, and even calling out that someone would be like wondering, what does this all mean? Maybe trying to, maybe I'm reading too much between the lines. This is my like literary annotation self, but someone would be trying to uncover what something means, trying to understand the deeper meaning, the symbolism there. To call that out also implies that back then there was seeking for symbolism. So there was something that is not in my digital notes. I know that it's here. That I wrote here. So I'm just gonna read, I guess, continuing. So I'm continuing from the sulfur bolting thing back to that point. So also sour service, Zeus, a bad mood, bad temper, very smart word choice, very intellectual for a playwright, but also for him to use that to make a servant one of the lower class, say, implies that intelligence at the time was higher, as no common man now would understand that quick wit. Like, to say sulfur bolting, that means like sour service. Like, it's the same thing of like understanding that hold your horses means to be stable. A lot of times we just say things, we don't fully understand it, but there is that meaning there. Obviously, yeah, I mean, when you say hold your horses, you mean be stable, but that's like what it really means. That's just the first modern example that came to my mind. Have we also declined in wisdom now, that the metaphors, maybe they were clear to them, but have we also declined in wisdom? Maybe then the metaphors were clear to them, but we assume that they were not, that maybe the myths and metaphors were what they believe to be facts because we deem ourselves wiser. Could it be that the metaphors were always very evident to them, but when we read history, we believe that they believed these metaphors as fact because they were very intellectual people? I'm not just saying that because my ancestors, but very intellectual people, right? It's entirely possible that, especially by this time in history, like 300s BC, early, I guess I'm saying early 300s BC, but because how the BCs works, it's like descending time. Yeah. When Aristophanes was alive. I mean, at that point, especially with like the blatant, complete disrespect of Zeus in the plays, it's entirely possible. And I wonder this, that they then did completely understand the spiritual implications, spiritual metaphors, and they were using them and applying them in their daily life. And we just, when we read myth and we see these statues and we see these things, we're like, they believe that as fact. Obviously they did. Obviously there was rituals. Obviously there was libations. Obviously there was reverence and respect and worship. But maybe there was a group of people who saw the metaphors very clearly. And we think that everyone just believed them. And we think that we're smarter now, that, oh, this is all silly. This doesn't mean anything. This is why I'm trying to find the spiritual implications in myth, and also with these plays. Because of the fact that there's a lot of arrogance, even with like historians of like, well, we're smarter now. There is a bias. And I feel like in history, one of the first things my world history teacher, who I had for many years, told me was history is bias. What we're reading, we don't know if everything happened the way that it's stated. Because the person, the historian, has their own biases, and that shows through in the way that history is taught to us. Starting, like, World History 101 with that, I mean, props to you. That's the truth. That is very true. But, you know, you're like, okay, then am I reading nonsense? No, it's true, because when it gives insight into how we perceive the past or how things were uncovered then, and there is truth. That's why you compare sources. This teacher would read us things from the textbook, but also pull other things, other resources to teach the same thing. And what is the common denominator between everything? And that is the fact, because there are certain things that the biases cannot cover. And those are the true to true facts. Do we have a bias as modern society, and especially when it comes to polytheism versus monotheism, do we have a bias that we just think that we know better than them? Maybe they knew. They probably knew that they were symbols. They probably were like, yeah, Zeus isn't actually real. It's just like an archetype. Maybe they knew that, but they also worship it. You never know. You never know. And that was a very interesting ponder to also think about the fact that, and especially when connecting to ancestral wisdom, I'm going to speak on that, is connecting to ancestral wisdom, you never know what your ancestors fully understood or fully didn't. So to connect to ancestral wisdom, you might be gifted with some wisdom. And you're like, where did this come from? My ancestors couldn't have known this. Maybe they did. Maybe they did. And we are arrogant enough to think that we are smarter now, that we know better now. Have we built pyramids now? Do we build structures that stay and stand the test of time? No. There's clearly more intelligence in some cases there. We have become over-reliant on, I know that my notes in my notebook are probably better than the notes that I put digitally. I probably know that, but I'm so reliant on the digital perspective, even though I don't want to be. I'm like, oh, it's easier. We have made advancements to make things easier, and has that made us lose our quick wit? Sometimes I wonder, and especially when I read things that I wrote when I was younger, I'm like, that was a very, very smart 5th grader. Was it the trauma? We'll never know. But like, I was a very smart 5th grader. How did I come up with that stuff then? I wasn't on technology a lot. Things weren't easy a lot. Like I look back at some journals and I'm like, I was handwriting stuff for hours, and me handwriting my notes for an hour hurts because I type a lot now. When I was younger, I was handwriting, like we had to handwrite everything. So like, there are certain things where it's like, is the advancements making us, in some cases, losing our wit, losing our wisdom, where then we're entirely made of wax, back to Icarus, entirely made of wax, where we can melt as soon as something goes wrong. There's too many things reliant on technology. I have the camera that I film on. It's a camera that I've had, it's probably like 15, 16 years old, this camera. I think my mom bought it for like some play that I did when I was like 5 years old. Like, I don't know. This is a very old camera and it's falling apart and I'm still using it. But we're too reliant on technology. Like, we're too reliant on it. But back then, they were surviving with a little candle and a papyrus and a feather dipped in ink. Like, have we lost these things? And then when it comes to spirituality, there's where that spiritual sloth comes in. And to not even try and understand the metaphors. And I always wonder, like, when I work with clients, and I receive messages, I do channelings, I do readings, and it's like, oh, the time for metaphors is done. Is the time for metaphors done because, like, we're finally at the period as a like collective all where we're higher enough that we don't need these metaphors, we don't need that challenge, our life is challenging, you know? Or is it because we wouldn't go through the effort of trying to uncover a metaphor now? Because I've sat down and I've tried to write spiritual metaphor things. It's like, would we now? Like, most times we don't even try to understand the metaphors hidden in any culture's mythology. Like, I'm doing Greek right now. I'll do others later because I've also seen spiritual implications in Egyptian and Norse mythology as well that I would love to uncover. Do we just like, like, is it that we're just like, yeah, we're not gonna go through the effort of doing that? So why give metaphors? It's just like, let's be as direct as we can be. We gotta do a little bit of work, so it's gonna be a little bit vague. There's a lot of detail. And that was the biggest thing I noticed when just going through the process of uncovering. In general thus far, but especially with this one. And especially when it comes to Hermes. Hermes in this play is the central, becomes central, bargaining, strategizing, even demanding libations to, not demanding libations, but for his work. Like for him to do the work, for him to be, like I mentioned, to go against Zeus. So he's like, I'll do anything for gold. Yeah, you're gonna celebrate me? Yeah, I'll do it then. Like, he spent a lot of time arguing and calling the main character the worst of all miscreants. What are you doing here? You will never see Zeus. And then he very quickly folds to gold. But there is a lot of moral negotiations with the messenger. See, spiritually, this can reflect how humans often bargain with consciousness, fate, or guides rather than confronting the divine source directly. Hermes embodies the trickster guide archetype, mischievous yet essential, sustained by our attention. He reminds us that spirit guides live only if we connect to them, and if we value this higher connection. When you think about the spirituality of it all. Also, what it represents is there's a determination of the main character that humans, we can be very determined for human things, and deities back then, or even the divine now, they don't see things the way that we see them. And they're like, oh, it's going to be fine. They see the bigger picture. We don't see the bigger picture. We see the current moment. And there is this determination, and there was something very beautiful about seeing that human determination for peace. Also very interesting. And you know, another perspective of the libations is also just like gratitude. When we have gratitude for higher power, when we have gratitude for our spirit team, for the angels, when we have gratitude, the universe is more inclined to help us. War and riots appear not as gods, but as like, they're called the twin sons of Zeus, and at some point war is referenced as a demon. Anger breeds fear, fear breeds control, and the cycle of the negative polarity takes hold. Cerberus is invoked as death's shadow. War inevitably leads to mortality. Aristophanes separates divine archetypes from human corruption. War is not divine fate, it is a demon born of human choice. Peace, by contrast, is sacred restoration. As the play moves into its closing act, Aristophanes shifts from parody to ritual. Peace and is finally, the goddess of peace is finally released. Silent beyond words, her presence is invoked through song, through the muses and the graces, even through quotations of the poet Homer, symbols of abundance flood the stage. Garlic for protection, pomegranates for rebirth, apples for love, grapes for Dionysius's joy, grain for fertility. These are cosmic signs. Peace restores the natural order. Marriage Emery seals this restoration with bride cakes and songs of union, transformation, and transform the comic stage into a ritual binding. Athens, symbolic wedding to peace. Craftsmen and metalworkers join the celebration, showing that war's destruction has given way to creation. Even the youth are redirected when they ask for songs of blood. The chorus refuses, and the main character refuses. In times of peace, violence is ignorance. Joy and abundance are the true inheritance. The play closes in festival atmospheres, libations poured, songs sung, dances performed. Aristophanes ridicules war, profiteers and false prophets, cleansing the community of corruption. What began with a dung beetle parody of Pegasus ends with a sacred rite of abundance. Comedy has become ritual, laughter has become invocation, and peace has become holy. Aristophanes does also name Euripides, mocking tragedies, solemnity. He proposes a new spiritual path, laughter as a liberation. He also does name Sophocles. Comedy is not escape, it is ritual by turning parody into invocation. Aristophanes shows that joy itself is sacred, quoting Homer, elevates peace to epic reverence. In the piece, laughter is not trivial, it is the tool of transformation. Aristophanes' piece is more than a political satire, it is a spiritual satire, a mythical inversion, a ritual of abundance. It begins with ego and parody and moves through bargaining and fear and ends with fertility, union, and festival. The message is clear. Peace is not merely the absence of war, it is cosmic restoration, sacred joy, and communal reunion and renewal. Comedy is the ritual that makes it manifest. And in the piece, laughter itself becomes the path to the divine. As the main character takes the path to the divine for peace to be brought among the people. There's obviously so much more. There's also like some references with the Gorgons too and things like that, but I can touch on that when we actually dive into those myths. I believe, from what I remember, those are the talking points that I really have when it comes to the spiritual implications of this play. But I do want to give affirmations and journal prompts based on the themes of this episode. That was a very randomly structured episode. I hope you liked it. Affirmations. I honor peace as a sacred state that restores balance within me and around me. I release the grip of fear and ego, choosing joy and harmony instead. I recognize that laughter and creativity are divine tools of transformation. I sustain my spirit guides and inner wisdom by giving them my attention and reverence. I celebrate abundance as a sign of cosmic renewal and divine blessings in my life. Now the 5 journal prompts. When have I experienced peace as more than the absence of conflict, but as a sacred presence? How do I bargain with my own consciousness or inner guides? The way that the main character, who I did not mention the name of, but his name is Tyrgaius. By the way, Tyrgaius bargains with Hermes. Number 3, what harvest symbols in my life remind me of abundance and renewal? Number 4, in what ways can laughter or joy act as a spiritual practice for me? And number 5, how can I honor both the God and the gods in my own spiritual journey? God as in source and gods as in the ascended masters. So those were the journal prompts. Now it's time to pull from the cup to see what next week will be. Pull from the cup. Let's see what this time will bring. Let us see. Oh, this is actually perfect continuation. The grace of spiritual joy. Story of the graces. This actually is a perfect segue from, old comedy play where the graces are referenced as well. With certain reverence, there actually is a point in the play where the master of the servants could not even be alike to the graces. Let alone Aphrodite, so that shows they just really didn't respect him. But yeah, the story of the graces and the graces of spiritual joy, so how the graces can help us feel more positivity. So that's what we will talk about in episode 14 next week, and I will see you then to uncover the wisdom left before us by the ancient ones.